daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Good evening, Britain. This is Friday Night Live with me, Ben Leo. Your weekend starts here on tonight's show. 50 days of Sir Keir Starmer, but it appears paedophiles, killers, and now robbers are treated better than people who write nasty things on the internet. Plus,
I completely understand why so many people are frustrated at the government that's not doing anything about their energy bills.
oh, that's a bit awkward. Labour promised to bring them down, but Brits are now expected to pay £150 more for energy this winter. Has the public been lied to? And after 10 people were stabbed at last year's Notting Hill Carnival, and with knife crimes spiralling across the UK this month, should the bank holiday party be going ahead at all? And who's Jeremy Clarkson talking about when he says someone's been banned from his new pub?
He's banned. He's the first person to be banned. He's actually on a board in the hall. He's banned.
Why? What have you got against him?
And breaking tonight, the Daily Telegraph has just dropped an update on a damning investigation into how the BBC paid chauffeurs convicted of paedophilia millions of pounds to transport celebrities and high-profile guests over almost 30 years. So one monster tasked with ferrying celebrities to BBC studios was a man convicted of raping a child at gunpoint. Attacks on other children by other drivers took place on BBC premises. The new update tonight from the Telegraph is that a victim has finally come forward and is demanding answers from the BBC. More on that breaking story very shortly. Getting stuck into all of tonight's topics are broadcaster Liz Kershaw, former Conservative Party Special Advisor Charlie Rowley, and former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. All that and more coming up, but first, your news headlines with Sam Francis.
Ben, thank you very much, and good evening to you. 2 minutes past 8, and the top story tonight. The sister of Hannah Lynch has described her as an angel and a star after her body was recovered from the wreckage of a super yacht that sank in Sicily. The 18-year-old was the last person to be rescued by divers. Her father, the tech tycoon Mike Lynch, also died. The family have released this photo that was taken shortly before they took that trip. Esme, the sister, says that she brought boundless love and was endlessly caring. The Energy Secretary's admitted the price cap rise will be deeply worrying for many families amid concerns more people could fall behind on their energy bills. The price cap's going up by 10% from October for millions of households across England, Scotland and in Wales. They face an average annual bill of £1,700, which Ofgem is blaming on higher wholesale costs. Well, Ed Miliband says he does understand why people are concerned.
No, this will be really worrying news for lots of families who will face even greater struggles this winter. And it's a direct result of our country's exposure to international gas markets that are controlled by dictators. And that is a legacy left to us by the last government. That's why this government has a plan to do something about it. Our mission for clean, homegrown power that we control in this country.
Ed Miliband there speaking earlier. Well, in other news today, Elsie Stankom's teacher told her funeral service she made everyone smile just by being her. The 7-year-old schoolgirl was among 3 who were stabbed to death in Southport last month. Her family said they want today to be known as Elsie's special day and a celebration of her life. And just a breaking line coming to us from the US this evening in the last few minutes. In fact, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the independent candidate for US president, is now endorsing Donald Trump in November's election against Kamala Harris. Speaking just moments ago, the perhaps lesser well-known White House hopeful said Democrats were no longer champions of the Constitution. Take a listen.
How did the Democratic Party choose a candidate that has never done an interview or debate during the entire election cycle? We know the answers. They did it by weaponizing the government agencies. They did it by abandoning democracy. They did it by suing the opposition and by disenfranchising American voters.
Well, that comes as Trump is, in fact, holding a rally nearby in Glendale later this evening as well. He has reportedly hinted that those two, himself and Robert, may meet and strike a potential alliance. Any more details on that we will, of course, bring to you. Meanwhile, though, it's being reported that several Secret Service agents are facing disciplinary action following the attempted assassination of Donald Trump in Pennsylvania last month. Some US networks tonight are suggesting 5, possibly 6 agents have been put on leave, although the exact number isn't known at this stage. It's also understood those agents include the head of the Pittsburgh field office, 3 other agents and a member of Trump's personal detail. You may remember that attack in July left Trump with minor injuries and resulted in 1 death, 2 injuries before the shooter was killed by a Secret Service sniper. Here, magistrates in England and Wales have been told to stop jailing people for several weeks to try to ease overcrowding in prisons. Offenders who are likely to serve time behind bars are to have their sentencing hearings postponed. That's days after emergency measures kicked in. It allows defendants to be held in custody for longer. And last month, an early release scheme for some inmates was also announced. Royal Mail delivered just under 80% of first-class posts on time during the spring, missing its target set by Ofcom again. The company's been told to deliver 93% of post within 1 working day, under rules set by the communications watchdog. It was fined £5.6 million last year for failing to do so. However, Royal Mail insists there have been improvements to the services. And finally, 3 stages at Leeds Festival have had to close today after strong winds brought by Storm Lillian. Gusts of up to 80 miles an hour are expected in northern parts of England and in Wales. The storms also caused disruption with roads blocked and a number of flights cancelled at Heathrow Airport. Those are the latest headlines from the GB Newsroom. For now, I'll be back with you at 9 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Massive news from the US there with JFK Jr. endorsing Donald Trump. But anyway, good evening. Let's focus on this side of the pond, because tomorrow marks 50 days of Sir Keir Starmer's premiership. I'm going to mark the occasion by telling you what his version of Great Britain looks like. Well, it looks like paedophiles are treated better than people who write nasty things on the internet. And I say that because A convicted child rapist has escaped jail for a second time because our prisons are too overcrowded. So instead of banging up vile monsters, we're putting people who write some tweets during the riots in the slammer for arguably harsh and draconian sentences. So let me tell you about this latest wrong-un. Rhys Newman. He was handed a suspended sentence last December for the historic rape of a girl under the age of 14, and that was in 2005. Under the terms of his sentence, he was ordered to sign the sex offenders register and had to tell police if he went on holiday. But, of course, surprise, surprise, in May, he jetted off to Egypt and didn't tell anyone. He breached the terms of his sentence and was hauled back to court where the judge said to him, and I quote, "If we had been in different times, then it would have been virtually inevitable you would have gone into custody. The only reason you've escaped immediate custody today is because of the prison overcrowding crisis." There we have it. So meanwhile, if you so much as observe this month's riots from the sidelines as an innocent bystander, another judge previously warned you'll be refused bail and banged up in custody too. And elsewhere, the mother of teenager Gordon Galt, who was killed in a knife attack, has expressed her shock and disbelief after being told in a letter that one of the people jailed for her son's death will be released early from prison as part of Labour's plans to make way for new inmates. Gordon, who was aged just 14, died of a stab wound in 2022 in Newcastle following an attack by Carlos Nito and Lawson Natty, pictured here. Natty will have served just 40% of his entire sentence when he's released early in just a few weeks' time. And last but not least, today it's revealed 30-year-old Walid Raoul, also known as the Rolex Ripper, has also been allowed to walk free after attempting to steal a 50 grand watch in London. And again, the judge blamed prison overcrowding. He has 9 convictions, 9 previous convictions, unbelievable, for 14 offences. So there we have it. Dare to type some rubbish on your computer in Britain and Keir Starmer will destroy your life. Child rapists, killers and robbers, meanwhile, well, carry on as you are, you're fine. Reaction now from Liz Kershaw, Charlie Rowley and James Snyder. Good evening, panel. Thank you for joining me.
Hiya.
Liz Kershaw, you were sort of shaking your head as I was reading that out. I mean, a litany of examples where serious criminals should be behind bars, but they're not, and instead people who write hurty words on the internet are.
Well, the first thing to say, Ben, is the spooky coincidence of all these courts around the country with different judges or magistrates taking the same harsh stance against the people in the rights. Like there's a central policy on this. And one of the pillars of our democracy is that the judiciary and the lawmakers in Parliament are separate and the judges are independent of our politicians. But I think any normal thinking person will put 2 and 2 together and think there's been some mandate from above. In fact, he's more or less expressed it, Keir Starmer, that you're going to come down harsh on these people, you're going to bang them up, whether it was for standing watching, whether... There was a woman the other day jailed for throwing water at a policeman.
Oh, it's just a joke.
Or that poor deluded woman in Cheshire who's caring for her husband. What sort of dreadful life has she got? And she lost it and she tweeted about mosques. It was inciting violence and that is wrong and criminal. But she shouldn't be locked up. But mate, that's what really worries me about this. But yeah, you've got people being let out of prison now who I think it's questionable whether or not they are a danger to the public. I tend to think some of them are. And should be incarcerated far more than somebody who's a keyboard warrior. Oh,
I mean, of course they're dangerous, but child rapists, robbers who go around stealing 50 grand watches, and killers who they've plunged knives into people and killed a young boy. These people are walking the streets, Charlie Rowley, and yet, as Liz said, keyboard warriors, whether the stuff they said was disgusting or not, a lot of it was, they're banged up for what I'd argue is pretty draconian sentences.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, you know, the point is that you've got to have enough prison places for all of these people, frankly. So, of course, you don't want to release people who are violent, people that are a threat to us in our everyday lives, whether they're robbers, killers, murderers, rapists, and the like of that particular low-life ilk. So you don't want those people in and around society. But, of course, I think if you are a keyboard warrior, if you are inciting hate, if you are, throwing water at a police officer or an emergency service worker, I do think that actually warrants a bit of a more than a slap on the wrist.
Oh, Charlie, come on.
And if a judge decides, as Liz was saying, if that's the judicial system, if a judge decides that actually that is the appropriate sentencing, then there should be a prison place for you.
They didn't all those judges around the country didn't independently, with their own thought process, decide on those levels of sentencing. They were told from above. You know, throwing water at somebody, a police officer, and yet we still haven't had any arrests when caught on video were those thugs in Manchester Airport punching police men and women in the face. They still haven't been charged.
And they absolutely should be. And what's annoying, I think, for most people is that the way the criminal justice system has worked at record and breakneck speed to get the sort of protesters through the justice system, and not people who actually need to be in jail. But the water issue is not a trivial one, because I think there are probably one or two people in this building that would have been happy and rightly calling for someone to go to spend a bit of jail time for throwing a milkshake over Nigel Farage or this parrot.
Well, no, not
I think
me.
that's absolutely...
I think...
No, I'm not suggesting, but I just think there would be people that think that that's totally
I think you'd be hard-pressed. James,
and I think doing that to a police officer is equally inappropriate.
I think there are a whole load of offences that shouldn't have jail time attached and should have other things. I think throwing a milkshake over somebody is not something that should have jail time. I think a lot of things that people say and write as opposed to do shouldn't be having jail terms. And some of the prison sentences that have gone down for protesters, particularly environmental protesters and some pro-Palestinian protesters, have been extremely over the top. And I think the balance is completely out of kilter. If there is a shortage of prison places, and personally I'm in favour of investment in prevention and rehabilitation rather than a dramatic expansion of the prison system, we need to have ways for dealing with lower level crimes that doesn't just lead to putting people in prison, because if you don't, then you get this sort of situation, which I think we all agree is ridiculous.
What do you make of Liz's very good point, actually, Liz? I'll slip you your fiver later, you slip me a fiver. Very good point about the apparent separation of the government and the judiciary. You know, that it's meant to be independent, and yet it seems this is very controlled. I mean, of course, Keir Starmer was head of the CPS. Has he just given his mates a call or a text and said, you know, do me a favour, make sure this lot get harsh sentences?
I don't know, but it does seem like there is thinking with one mind across the judiciary on the severity of sentences for those involved in racist violence, but also for those that were involved with saying things online going in both directions. I've seen, for example, the case, I think it's brought using the Online Harms Act against somebody who, to my view, seems to have libelled Tommy Robinson, but in my view, it's not a crime to libel somebody. Tommy Robinson is entitled to sue the person for saying that he said something that he didn't say. And it looks like there are efforts to be very firm, going the other way to avoid the erroneous charge of two-tier policing, two-tier justice.
Charlie?
Look, I'm quite a liberal person, as I think most people might know by now, but I have to say, I just don't accept the reason why you go to prison, and the reason why there is a prison sentence and a prison place for you, is this: if you are going to be a threat to the public. Now, James, you talk about Just Stop Oil. They absolutely should be banged up. They bring down our national infrastructure. They stop ambulances saving other people's lives.
Let me just stop you. I agree. But when our prisons are full and there's a choice between a child rapist or Just Stop Oil going in the slammer, you're going to pick the nonce every day of the week.
Again, I'm not going to get into the...
Yes or no, Charlie?
Of course you're going to say, but this particular story, let's just be absolutely clear, and there is absolutely no justification to. But we're not talking about a 30-year-old man now who raped a 14-year-old girl. They were both 14 at the time. The offence took place in 2005. The reason what the judge has said to him today that you can't go to prison is because prison is full, because he's tried to leave the country just to go on holiday and didn't tell anyone. Not because of the offence that took place in 2005, where he should have gone to prison.
Can I just tell you why I've watched this and my blood has boiled? My mother, carer, emptied her bank account. There was £86,000 in her bank account and it disappeared. And I forensically, myself, traced all where these payments had been made and where the money had gone, took it to the police. It went to court, and the carer was given an 18-month suspended sentence.
Yeah.
She more or less, you know, my mother just declined after that and died very quickly. But I just at the time I was so upset that I sat in that courtroom and heard the judge say she could go home.
What was the reason for such a lenient sentence?
Because she had a dependent child.
Oh, again, another...
He said he wasn't locking her up because she had a child of school age, about 10 or 11 years old. We'd lost my mum, all her money had gone, everything. But I sat there and heard that day, and I wrote about it, and I spoke about it on TV subsequently. But can you imagine when I've been sitting there watching people go to prison for sending an email or standing by a protest or throwing water? And what I learned from that court case was the judge's hands were kind of tied, because there are maximum sentences in grades depending on how much money, you know, it's all graded. And he said to me, I went up to the desk and I said, I'm disappointed. Oh, that's all. And he said, I'm sorry, that's all I could do. They have sentencing guidelines. Suddenly there are no sentencing guidelines, and you can get a custodial sentence for something very menial. And I just think it sucks.
Yeah, it's a joke. And bless your poor mum, Liz. When did she pass?
She died in March 2020 after they'd thrown her out of an NHS hospital to clear beds for COVID people, and she was shoved into a care home and died 2 weeks later of COVID.
Deary me. I'm sorry that happened to you and your mum. Poor woman.
Yeah, I'm not here to shut this, but I'm just talking I'm talking about the justice system. It stinks.
Yeah, it's a good example. It's broken, completely broken. Anyway, guys, thank you. We'll be back in just a tick. Coming up, an update to a damning investigation into how the BBC paid paedophiles millions of pounds to chauffeur clients. One victim tonight has come forward. More on that next. You're watching Friday Night Live with me, Ben Leo, only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
The Princess of Wales could be back to full duties by the autumn. This would be wonderful news.
Well, I actually don't think she is going to be back to full-time duties by the autumn. I think that's how I read it. But in fact, I think what they were saying, this is a report by the Daily Mail's royal editor, Rebecca English, is that Catherine is still recovering and she's still having treatment, but she doubts whether she'll be back to full-time duties, but we will be seeing her. So we will be, seeing her at big royal events, and she'll, if she's up to it, she will, appear now and then, but most of her work will be done from home because she's still having the cancer treatment. And as she said way back in the summer, she has good days and she has bad days.
Yeah, and we can all understand that, can't we? But it does make such a difference, doesn't it, to catch glimpses of her and seeing her and William this week congratulating the GB athletes after the success at the Olympics. It really does make all the difference just to see her, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And I think, she wants to get out there, but I don't think she's going to be back at the daily chore of royal duties, visiting hospitals, things like that. I don't think she'd be strong enough to do that. But, I mean, she looks terrific. We know she's had a brutal year, in fact, probably much, much worse than any of us can imagine. And so she's, doing what her doctors are telling her. She's taking it very gently. I'm sure she wants to go full steam ahead, but she is being restrained, as it were.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference
It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Ben Leo. And breaking this hour, one of the victims of a paedophile chauffeur employed by the BBC says the broadcaster should be held to account. Alex Cook, who has waived his right to anonymity, has spoken for the first time with the Daily Telegraph. The newspaper reports that the BBC paid convicted paedophiles millions of pounds to transport celebrities and high-profile guests over almost 30 years. And Cook said he was sexually abused by David Smith, who died in 2013 between the ages of 12 and 14. It's just terrible. Cook said that one of the allegations Smith pled guilty to related to abuse which occurred at BBC Television Centre in West London. It's just one thing after another for the BBC. So should there be a national inquiry, as I think there should be, into the broadcaster? Liz, former BBC star, Radio 6 legend. What's going on at your old employer?
Well, I think it's just a different world. Maybe Savile was the watershed when it all came out eventually about him.
Can I read you the names? So we've got Jimmy Savile, Jonathan King, Stuart Hall, Chris Denning, Rolf Harris, and of course Hugh Edwards.
DLT.
There's more.
And in the pipeline, we've got currently an investigation which started after revelations by the Mail, was it, in January, about Russell Brand and his time at the BBC. And I gave evidence to that in January. I was asked to give evidence because I worked there at the same time in the building in 6 Music and Radio 2. And I've emailed twice now to say what's happened to that investigation.
Yeah.
I was wasting my time. I wrote a big piece in the Telegraph about it. And we haven't finished yet. We're still gathering evidence.
I think they're probably still looking into it. But Russell Brand, of course, does deny all allegations.
And so they could announce that that's the conclusion, couldn't they? But it's just one after the other. But the vetting was so different back in the day. They either all laughed together about it, you know, all boys together, like they did about Savile and told jokes about him, or they just turned a blind eye. But I think they've shown this week. With the ex-footballer and, you know, potential for the future, we'll come on to this, Match of the Day host, the way that somebody reported him, a colleague, or claimed that he'd sent ill-advised tweets, and he was straight out of the door.
Yeah.
So the contrast between... And we don't know what he's done, and we don't know the depth of it.
As far as we know now, Jermaine Genius, who you're referring to, just sent some flirty text to a younger employee.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, it's not comparable at all to the likes of Savile or anything like that.
That's what I've gleaned from it, but the way it's set up by the BBC, it's like these texts were so disgusting and horrendous. I immediately thought, if this guy's flirted with somebody by text and he's got the sack for that, we don't know.
Yeah.
But what a contrast with the past.
They were quick to act, of course, Charlie?
Well, just on the Genius, I mean, it's been described as unsolicited digital communications, including text, so we don't know what that includes.
Are you talking about Jermaine Genius now?
Jermaine Genius.
Yes.
So we're not entirely sure whether it was just flirty text or whether it was images of or anything. I mean, we want to speculate.
We don't know the facts.
Unsolicited.
Do we need a national inquiry into the BBC's apparent proficiency for paedophiles?
Well, I think you're probably right now, because this isn't just... You take the BBC, and we all fall into the trap, I think the BBC is just one organisation, which it is, of course. Everybody falls under the umbrella of the BBC. But this is now something that's dripped into, whether it's... And whether it's allegations of what we're hearing about with Jermaine Genius, whether it's, whether it's BBC Sport, whether it's the allegations of bullying within Strictly Come Dancing and BBC Entertainment, whether it's Hugh Edwards in terms of BBC News, whether it's everything else we've talked about in BBC Radio.
There's another one that the poor... I feel sorry for the guy. Tim Westwood has been under investigation by the BBC for over a year now, 1 or 2 years, and as far as I know, there's been no police investigation and no charges have been brought against him. Again, there are claims of a sexual nature, but what the BBC is they're entirely cack-handed. at dealing with anything, because there's a whole management structure. You've seen it on the so-called comedy, fictional comedy, W1A. That's all it seems to exist to do is not to make programmes, but to push things down, cover each other's backs, and for God's sake, don't let the Director
James,
General.
can I read you some of the facts of this breaking story tonight? So, Niven Sinclair, who's the man who ran one of many chauffeur companies at the BBC. There were 11. He ran one of them. This is at the time. So he was responsible for transporting celebs, including Jimmy Savile, as well as guests, including Ted Heath, the Prime Minister at the time, to and from BBC studios. One of Smith's victims has spoken for the first time and says he's considering legal action against the BBC. So Niven Sinclair, who's now died, he was convicted once of raping a child at gunpoint. He employed a driver who was convicted of abusing children at BBC studios. I mean, this story, I will say, is from 2016. The new update is that this chap has now come forward, revealed his identity, and said that the BBC need to be held to account.
Well, it's obviously really, really quite horrific. And what was clearly going on at the BBC for a very long time, and also in other big organisations in other parts of society, is unaccountable power. And where there is unaccountable power, it can be horrifically misused, which appears to be, the case here and in all those other cases relating to BBC paedophilia that you mentioned. I think it would probably be a good thing to shine some light on that, not because that's necessarily the culture and practices of the BBC today, but it's important to know how does that sort of thing set in organisations. Because it's not just the BBC that this happens in. If you look around Britain and in other countries, where you have organisations where people are covering each other's backs, very bad things, up to and including this sort of thing.
Do you reckon it's also just the law of averages as well? I mean, it's such a giant, a massive employer, thousands of employees. I guess, is it just,
I think if your sample group is the big name talent people, that some of whom you've mentioned, that's not a really enormous number, and if that meant it's a disproportionate percentage of the population who are these types of really grotesque criminals.
Charlie, then last word to this.
But you're absolutely, I mean, it's a culture, isn't it? If you're sort of in that sort of environment, absolutely no justification, but there's which means the BBC and there needs to be that accountability. So who is running the head of talent? Who is running the recruitment processes? Who is actually keeping check and balances on those individuals, whether it's the drivers, whether it's the talent, whether it's the producers, whether it's people abusing their power for their own gain.
But as recently as with the Hugh Edwards thing, the parents of a young lad went to complain at the BBC twice and were ignored, and then they went to the Sun, and then it all came out. But there was an inquiry set up in 2012 by the then Director General, George Entwistle, when all the Savile stuff came out, and it was chaired by Dame Janet Smith, a very prominent, eminent judge, and it was into the culture and customs in the BBC that allowed Savile and others to operate. And it's that thick and it's fascinating.
OK, I've got a statement from the BBC. They have said, well, they spoke to the Telegraph, actually, but they said, today's BBC has incredibly robust safeguarding policies and processes which have been strengthened decade upon decade. If people have any complaints or concerns to put to us, we want to hear from them, and they will be trusted with the utmost care and seriousness. OK, fascinating debate and, pretty grim story. More to come on that. But coming up, has Labour deceived the public on energy bills? I'd argue they have. You're watching Friday Night Live with Ben Leo. Back in a tick.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Through this weekend, it's going to remain fairly cool and wet for many of us on Saturday. Drier and a little bit warmer through the rest of the weekend, though. It's been a disruptive start to the day with Storm Lillian. That's now moved away into the North Sea. Behind it is a clearer picture. We're starting to pick up more of a southwesterly wind. That will drag in some showers to parts of southwestern Scotland, many western areas of Scotland, in fact, as well as Northern Ireland through the first part of the night. But over to the second second part of the night, the early hours of Saturday, we look to the south, where a band of very heavy rain moves into many southern counties. Lots of cloud pulling in from the south as well, ahead of that across the Wales and the Midlands. Now, there is a rain warning in force for many eastern areas of England, particularly the south and east, where we could see around 60 millimetres of rain falling throughout Saturday morning. And with lots of people travelling around, there could be some disruption on the roads and delays to travel. Further north, a slightly drier picture, but still some pretty heavy showers are likely for parts of Scotland and northwestern England. A drier picture, though, for the far north of Scotland, as well as the north and east across parts of Aberdeenshire and the Moray coast. And here it should stay relatively dry and bright through much of the day, but showers will continue to affect the north and west, as well as some areas of Wales and southwestern England. Now, the heaviest rain will clear away to the far south and east, but showers will likely move into these areas later on in the afternoon. So a pretty mixed picture for most of us on Saturday. And with quite brisk winds still through the day, it's still going to feel on the cooler side of things. We could see temperatures sticking around in the mid-teens for many of us. On Sunday, it looks a little bit warmer. There will be more in the way of sunshine, particularly through the morning across parts of England and Wales, but the next batch of rain will spread into parts of the northwest. Doesn't look quite as heavy, but will introduce quite a lot of cloud and some quite widespread drizzly rain. More widely dry as we look ahead to Monday, and temperatures will start to rise much closer to average, and we're looking at the mid-20s by Tuesday.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said Stump. You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Ben Leo. Now, households will see an average of £149 rise in their energy bills from October under the regulator Ofgem's new price cap. That's despite the Prime Minister saying this 2 years ago as leader of the opposition.
I understand. I completely understand why so many people are frustrated at the government that's not doing anything about their energy bills, that's dithering and delaying, just like it did at the beginning of the year. In the end, politics is about choices. And this government is choosing to protect the profits of oil and gas companies, unexpected profits of oil and gas companies, rather than sticking up for and helping hard-working families and struggling businesses. I hope that, just as we did earlier this year, we can force them into a U-turn. Because under my leadership, Labour is on the side of working people.
Yeah, we've got the receipts, Prime Minister. We won't forget. And in 2022, he also said this.
So I want to know how you're going to help single parents.
Well, Ella, what we're going to do for you and for anyone is freeze those energy bills going forward. Because, Ella, I don't know your circumstances, but I doubt when you hear the energy companies and the government talking about £3,500 possibly for energy bills going up to £4,000. I suspect, like many, many other people, you shudder at that because these are huge, huge amounts of money, which is why we say under a Labour government we'd freeze those prices. We wouldn't allow them to go up, Ella, because what you're already paying is going to go through the roof.
Dear, oh dear. And today, the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, has blamed energy price rises on what he said was the Conservatives' legacy and their failure to invest in renewables. I said this would happen. I said weeks before Labour won power, they're going to come in and blame everything on the Tories. So, James Schneider, who is to blame for this absolute mess and, may I add, pack of lies from Labour?
Well, to begin with, the government, because the government could do something different. Then you have the previous government, the government before that, and the government before that. So we have about 40 years of government policies which have led to a system where we can be effectively price gouged at not 1 point, but 2 points. First, we can be price gouged by the oil and gas companies who, when prices go up and supply is restricted, their profits go up. And by privatised energy companies who are not really competing with each other for the delivery of energy. They are competing with each other on the marketing to us, the consumers.
Yeah.
So, yes, this government that's been in power for 49, 50 days could and should have made a different decision to intervene to prevent this.
Do you accept they've lied? Labour have lied.
This rise. I think they've been fundamentally dishonest about a great range of things. I think that Keir Starmer lies and
say
lies
the
and
word, James.
Lies and lies and lies about many things, as I have said beforehand. I think the clip from 2022 used is slightly unfair, but what they said in the election is that bills will be lower and they'll intervene for bills to be lower. And bills aren't going to be lower because they don't have the policies which would allow you to do that. Now, you could argue that they are their longer-term policies could lead to lower bills through energy investment, but that doesn't help people in the here and now. And there's no reason why you can't do both things.
Yeah.
There's no reason why you can't intervene to prevent price gouging by either the oil and gas companies or the energy providers, and at the same time be investing in publicly owned energy that we can use to bring down bills over the longer term.
Yeah, it was in their manifesto, Charlie, that they would reduce bills instantly, not just in the future with GB Energy, but, you know, straight away.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the first thing to say is I think in that second clip, Sir Keir Starmer actually looked quite dapper. I think he had quite good fashion sense.
He looks a lot more relaxed than he does these days. He looks sort of frazzled, haggard, tired.
But I think we're wearing something quite similar. So, I mean, I top my hat to him.
He always wears this sort of get-up.
Yes, I don't know what I was thinking this evening. But, I mean, the serious side is that you're absolutely right, Ben. I mean, this GB Energy stuff is going to just end up costing us all a lot more than what we've bargained for.
Well, they say it's going to save us hundreds of pounds a year.
I mean, I will eat my hat. I'll come back on and eat a hat if that ever happens. But it's not going to. Look, the last government, yes, of course, you need to invest more in renewable energy as well as solar, as well as nuclear power. I think something that the Lib Dems blocked under the coalition years. The previous government actually did step in to protect people's energy bills. Now that's had repercussions because that means that taxes haven't been able to come down as quickly as I think the Conservatives would have wanted them and should have brought them down to. That was a failure of the last government. But in terms of protecting people's bills, it's something that the previous government did. This government, exactly as Sir Keir Starmer has just said in that first clip, is about political choices, and he is choosing to allow these bills to go up, and that is going to hit hard-working people.
Liz, how much goodwill has Keir Starmer and this Labour government got left?
Well, I gave them 2 years on July the 4th when they got elected, and I'm sticking to that. But it really, what's the phrase, sticks in my craw. Ed Miliband saying that we're in the situation we are now with energy because the last government, i.e. the Conservative government, since 2010, has dealt in buying energy from abroad with dictators and thugs and despots and whatever phrase. Yeah, how long does he think we've been buying oil and gas from the likes of Saudi Arabia and Russia? It's not just the last government since 2010. And you had a great point about the last 40 years, which spooky. That's the miners' strike, 1983. Margaret Thatcher wanted to smash the trades unions, so she did it using coal. And I drove past Sheffield on the M1 the other day for the first time in a while, and I saw the ridiculous setup now where there used to be the cooling towers, big landmark, and they've all been demolished, and they've now got this something looks like from Legoland with a chute. And and it's a power station. What's it run on? Imported wood from the Amazon.
And do you remember how proud they were of the videos of them? I think Ed Davey, there was a video of Ed Davey demolishing a power station. The pride, the joy in his face. Ridiculous. And they've had so many chances in yesteryear to build nuclear power stations. I used to work at EDF Energy back in the day when I was 17, 18. Back then, they were being urged to build nuclear power stations and secure our energy future.
Well, the decommissioning places like Dungeness on the Kent coast.
Yeah.
And we're sitting on loads of natural gas. As I always say on this show, get fracking, please.
Yes.
Also, we've still got oil in the North Sea. They've banned any new exploration.
Frack. Turn the countryside into Swiss cheese.
So hypocritical. We'll achieve net zero by 2030 by having no emissions ourselves in creating, in harvesting natural resources, coal, gas, oil.
Yeah.
Importing it instead. They've put big new containers to store liquid gas, which is being brought on tankers from the United States.
Great point. I'm going to move on to this next story because it's quite time sensitive. It's this weekend. Thousands of police officers are set to descend on West London this weekend as the capital's Notting Hill Carnival returns. But after 10 people were stabbed at last year's events, and with knife crime, of course, spiralling across the UK this month, should it be going ahead, James?
Yes, of course. The Notting Hill Carnival is...
But it's a stab fest.
The Notting Hill Carnival brings together millions of people to have a great 3 days, celebrate and have a good time, and also support and celebrate.
Stabbing doesn't sound like... Getting stabbed doesn't sound like a good time. No. Can we get these stats up from previous years? I think we've got them somewhere. So, in 2023, 10 people were stabbed. 2022, 7 people were stabbed. 2019... Is that 2019? My eyes are so bad. 18... 15 were stabbed. 2018, 7. Look, it goes on and on.
Yeah.
People are stabbed year after year. If this was any other event, it would be canned.
No, that's not true. There are some gangs which go to try to settle disputes in and among the big crowds, and that is a tiny minority of people who should be dealt with by the police, and it is not a reason to cancel this long-running, the biggest street party in Europe. As far as I'm aware, the biggest carnival in Europe. 2-3 million people go over 3 days. It's a huge, fantastic thing. It's part of what makes London a really good place to be, and we shouldn't get rid of it. That doesn't mean that we support stabbing, of course not.
Charlie, we've got 30 seconds.
Yes.
Do you support the Notting Hill Carnival? I argue we need to can it.
Yes.
Stabbings every year, guaranteed.
No, it should go ahead. But if anybody crosses the line where they obviously break the law or commit a stabbing offence, obviously something quite serious, then the police should act with the full force of the law, and these people should be sped through the criminal justice system just equally as quickly as we've seen with the previous riots to make sure that it is not...
Prisons are overcrowded, mate. They'll be on the
people
streets.
who carry knives and stab people should be facing jail sentences.
Not in Keir Starmer's Britain. Liz Kershaw, if this was say, what the media would call a far-right gathering of protesters concerned about migration, and people were getting stabbed...
3 million of them over the weekend.
People were getting stabbed every year, it would be banned.
I just would like people to be honest about why there are stabbings. You said gangs, rival gangs. But I went to a festival, carnival on the Kent coast on Wednesday night. It was absolutely fantastic, the sense of community, the sense of family, tradition. It was so eccentric, quintessentially English, and it was joyful and peaceful.
OK. But ban the Notting Hill Carnival or not?
No, just police it properly.
OK. All right. Good stuff. Well, you won't find me there this weekend. I'm working, actually. But even if I wasn't, I wouldn't be there. I'd probably be in my garden staring at the sky or doing something relaxing. Next, who's... That's my idea of fun these days. You know.
Stare at the sky.
Who is Jeremy Clarkson talking about when he says that he's banned somebody from his new pub?
He's banned. He's the first person to be banned. He's actually on a board in the hall. He's banned.
Why? What have you got against him?
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
John Steinbeck once said of his 1939 novel The Grapes of Wrath that he intended to rip a reader's nerves to rags. Well, GB News sent its famously delicate Stefan Kyriazis to see an adaptation of the work in a London theatre, and somehow he's made it into the studio today. Give people a tiny background about The Grapes of Wrath. It's about the Depression, isn't it?
Yes, it's the Great Plains, which were absolutely ravaged by droughts. They'd completely overfarmed the topsoil, so they had all these huge dust storms, and basically the farms were worthless. So they reckon in the 1930s, about 3.5 million people left this huge central agrarian area of America. And this is a very poor, white working region. Often, many of them headed for the coast to California to this dream of orange groves, white houses, plentiful work. And we focus in on the Joad family, very poor, very working class. Tom Chode has just got out of prison for homicide in self-defence, and he's played by one of the Treadaways, Luke Treadaway, who I confused with his twin Harry.
Understandably.
They are identical. And so they pack everything into this kind of old-fashioned jalopy. It's a bit like Beverly Hillbillies, but not humorous. I think there's about 13 people crammed, hanging off the sides, and they embark on this odyssey across the country. So there's all these huge themes about migration, about prejudice. They are viewed as an underclass by other Americans. So although they're migrants, they're not quite immigrants, but they're treated very poorly, as almost subhuman. When they get there, the dream turns out to be false, the pay is terrible, and then very often when they take the job the next day, the pay is halved. It's a terrible life.
It's a very angry novel.
It's an angry, dark novel.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have saved Storm. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Friday Night Live with me, Ben Leo. Now, celebrity petrolhead turned farmer Jeremy Clarkson has opened a new pub, but he's already banned one customer.
Would you invite Keir to your pub, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister?
No, he's banned. He's the first person to be banned. He's actually on a board in the hall. He's banned.
Why? What have you got against him?
Hello? I thought you were running a news operation.
And it's not the first time the Prime Minister hasn't been welcome at a boozer.
That man is not allowed in my pub. Get out of my pub. Go on. Calm yourself down. Get out of my pub.
That was from the COVID days, of course, that landlord protesting against lockdowns. My favourite clip of the COVID era. James, why does Sir Keir Starmer keep getting banned from pubs?
I don't know, but I can't imagine that he's that upset about not being able to have a pint with Jeremy Clarkson. Why? I thought Jeremy Clarkson meant to oppose to...
What's wrong with Jezza?
Well, to be honest, these two, I'm looking at a photo of the two of them here, and I can't think of two people I'd less like to be in the corner of a pub with. I thought Jeremy Clarkson was meant to be against cancel culture and all of this. He's cancelled Keir. Aren't you meant to be furiously opposed to...
I think Starmer's the exception, isn't he? the PM's always fair game, especially when he's had a torrid first 50 days. Charlie, have you ever been barred from a pub?
I haven't, actually. In fact...
That's a surprise. Charlie, I'd bar you for being a Tory wet.
People welcome me into their pubs, no end, regardless of the establishment. I go down very well, James. I do.
That's very nice.
And I
bet you do.
I do, I'm a hoot. And so no, I've never been barred, but I have been... yes, to a fair few pubs, and I might have been asked to leave.
Good for you.
But nothing anything.
You sound like Theresa May. You've waltzed through, fields of wheat.
Yes,
you rebel. Liz, would you go for a pint with Keir Starmer?
No, I think he'd bore me stiff. I mean, I've never met him, but I can't imagine him having a belly laugh. He's almost robotic.
Who's met Keir Starmer here?
I worked with him.
Yeah, have you seen him laugh?
Have you seen him laugh?
In my experience, which admittedly was almost entirely in a work setting, or he was my MP for a bit, I haven't seen him do a lot of laughing.
I'd love to go to the pub.
People can be different in their personal life and their professional life, so I don't know, but...
OK.
I've met him. I'll be returning his clothes later on.
Right, OK. Let's move on to this last story very quickly, because it's quite funny. The parent company of Jack Daniels has scrapped diversity hiring. Earlier this week, Harley Davidson, the motorbike company, made a similar decision. So, Liz, are major corporations finally finally standing up against the woke agenda.
Yeah, these two companies have recognised that they're actually paying for it on the bottom line, and their customers are angry and they're turning away. And so they've said, right, we're going to stop all this diversity, inclusion and equality stuff, and we're going to go back to our customer base, and we're going to go back to our traditional models. And this is great because I've boycotted so many shops for different reasons. I have to remind myself, I can't go in boots. Oh, no, I'm not going in boots.
Why do you boycott shops?
Because of the way they avoid tax, or that they refuse to advertise on GB News.
Oh, Liz Kershaw, you champion.
And I think it's just outraged, and I think it's time that... There's so many people voted for reform. There's so many people now watching GB News, and it's just commercial... Now.
Commercial suicide.
Yeah.
James, very quickly, 30 seconds, then last word to you, Charlie.
What's the question?
On Jack Daniels, with DEI scrapping all these woke diversity quotas, good or bad?
I think companies wanting to be inclusive and have a diverse workforce seems perfectly sensible. I don't see why it's this enormous culture war issue.
OK. Charlie?
Well, it's a drink, isn't it? I mean, as long as it just... I don't think they do quite what the diversity...
Well, they're with the staff employing, you know...
Well, a certain number of gay employees putting flags up and so on.
You just need the best people, the most qualified people for the job to get the best taste in whatever Jack Daniels is. And anything else. For
I can't drink it. It's so sick.
Other whiskey brands are available.
Yeah.
Is JD actually proper whiskey, though? It's not, is it?
It's bourbon, isn't it?
Right.
From the French word. It's bourbon, and it's made in Tennessee.
Right, got it.
In
Kentucky. I think the headquarters is in Kentucky.
All right, OK.
Yeah. All right, Liz, Charlie and James, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Great discussions. Coming up next, it's Patrick Christie's. Patrick, what have you got in store for us from 9 p.m?
Yeah, it was 50 days of Sir Keir Starmer, so I thought it's quite a good opportunity to just pick him apart, isn't it? And where to start? We've got the energy bill lie, we've got the unions, immigration being a bit two-tier, David Lammy, Ed Miliband, Yvette Cooper. I mean, you could go on, and I intend to, actually, this evening. Facial recognition technology as well, they're rolling that out in an increased way. Is that against our human rights? And the BBC humiliate themselves at the Democrat conference. There is an absolute corker of a video for me to show you on all of that. So, yes. Oh, and, should we bring back being stricter in schools after Britain's strictest head teacher got a cracking set of GCSE results?
Yes, agreed. I think we should definitely be stricter in schools. And also all the left-wing media going to the Democratic convention and, you know, salivating over Kamala Harris. When Farage did that in America with the RNC, they were saying, hang on a minute, isn't Nigel meant to be in Clacton with his constituents? Lots of backbench Labour MPs were at the DNC. Didn't see people like Alistair Campbell and John Sopel barking mad on that occasion. But anyway, listen, thank you for joining me tonight. It's been lots of fun. Thank you to my panel. I'm back this weekend with Ben Leo tonight from 9 p.m. tomorrow and Sunday. I'll see you then. Hope you have a good weekend. Enjoy your weather now with Annie. And then it's Patrick. Good night.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. Through this weekend, it's going to remain fairly cool and wet for many of us on Saturday. Drier and a little bit warmer through the rest of the weekend, though. It's been a disruptive start to the day with Storm Lillian. That's now moved away into the North Sea. Behind it is a clearer picture. We're starting to pick up more of a southwesterly wind. That will drag in some showers to parts of southwestern Scotland, many western areas of Scotland, in fact, as well as Northern Ireland through the first part of the night. But over to the second part of the night, the early hours of Saturday, we look to the south, where a band of very heavy rain moves into many southern counties. Lots of cloud pulling in from the south as well, ahead of that across the Wales and the Midlands. Now, there is a rain warning in force for many eastern areas of England, particularly the south and east, where we could see around 60 millimetres of rain falling throughout Saturday morning. And with lots of people travelling around, there could be some disruption on the roads and delays to travel. Further north, a slightly drier picture, but still some pretty heavy showers are likely for parts of Scotland and northwestern England. A drier picture, though, for the far north of Scotland, as well as the north and east across parts of Aberdeenshire and the Moray coast. And here it should stay relatively dry and bright through much of the day, but showers will continue to affect the north and west, as well as some areas of Wales and southwestern England. Now, the heaviest rain will clear away to the far south and east, but showers will likely move into these areas later on in the afternoon. So a pretty mixed picture for most of us on Saturday. And with quite brisk winds still through the day, it's still going to feel on the cooler side of things. We could see temperatures sticking around in the mid-teens for many of us. On Sunday, it looks a little bit warmer. There will be more in the way of sunshine, particularly through the morning across parts of England and Wales, but the next batch of rain will spread into parts of the northwest. Doesn't look quite as heavy, but will introduce quite a lot of cloud and some quite widespread drizzly rain. More widely dry as we look ahead to Monday, and temperatures will start to rise much closer to average, and we're looking at the mid-20s by Tuesday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss out on your chance to win a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial